Chapter 551. Proof of Strength. His teammates hadn't responded yet, but Chen Guo already looked like she was about to cough blood. When she saw the team's attitude towards Yi Shu, she was looking forward to the following show. For example, if Yi Shu didn't have the tank deal damage, the tank, Crispy Bean, wouldn't be able to hold the boss and the boss would go out of control. Chen Guo believed Yi Shu had the ability to make this happen. But the more she watched, the more doubtful she became. As Yi Shu controlled his character, he didn't even touch his keyboard. His left hand only moved to walk, attack, or activate a skill. Otherwise it rested on the table. Only his right hand moved sometimes. His headphones hung over his neck, sending out noise through the speakers. Is he planning on messing up the aggro by playing like a noob? Chen Guo originally had faith in this god's ability, so she continued to patiently watch him play, but the tank Crispy Bean never lost control over the aggro. Chen Guo thought about it. Crispy Bean wasn't a bad tank and small monsters died relatively quickly, so perhaps there wasn't enough time to deal enough damage to pull the aggro. If you just went up ahead of the tank and pulled the monster, it would be too obvious. The team would see through your ploy instantly. Thus, Chen Guo felt like Yi Shu would show off his godly might when the boss came. However, the first boss went by and only one sentence resulted from it. I'm just leeching. When Yi Shu said this sentence, he wasn't even sitting up straight. His head wasn't even supported by the back of his chair, and it looked like it would fall off. His mouse clicked a few times as he spoke indifferently. What's wrong with you? Clover wasn't happy. Even though she had told him it would be okay to just leech off them, she never thought that he would actually leech. The heavenly domain didn't have noobs. Let alone Clover, the other 8 team members could tell just from the numbers from the damage chart that he was leeching. The 9th place character was only a third of the 8th place character in the damage chart. Yi Shu's unrivaled Super Hottie didn't have good equipment, but everyone else besides Crispy Bean had low-tier equipment as well. In fact, their equipment was of the same tier as unrivaled Super Hotties. Although unrivaled Super Hottie's equipment was meant for a tank, his DPS shouldn't be a third of the next lowest player's DPS. Crispy Bean listened and turned around to look at unrivaled Super Hottie. He looked as if he had just heard a joke. What? You're that petty? Do you really think you leeching will make things difficult for us? How conceited of you. Let me tell you something. With your attitude, even if a knight equipment drops, you don't have the qualification to pick it up. Donating it to the guild storage would be more useful than giving it to you. Crispy Bean, Clove shouted. She clearly felt like Crispy Bean had gone too far. I don't think he has those sort of thoughts. If he really wanted to grief, there are lots of better ways to do so. He could just run around randomly and pull a bunch of monsters over, but that's not what he's doing. All of you know I'm the leader. He. Quote. When Clover said, he, she suddenly paused. She originally wanted to say that unrivaled Super Hottie was following orders and hadn't made any mistakes, but right when she was about to say it, she suddenly realized, had she even given any instructions to unrivaled Super Hottie? She decided to call him you after thinking about how to address him, but she had never said you besides in the small argument from before. If she hadn't given him any orders, then it meant he didn't need any orders. On the other hand, Clover had been correcting the others the entire time. She only realized this now. Crispy Bean misunderstood her pause though. He thought Clover had realized unrivaled Super Hottie had attempted something harmful, but then again, as an outstanding tank, if someone had intentionally tried griefing, he would have definitely known about it. Thinking about this, Crispy Bean spoke, isn't it too obvious if he does it that way? If some sort of hidden opportunity appears, do you think he won't take advantage of it? He won't, Clover said with certainty. She seemed to have discovered something after looking back. Clover's confident tone surprised Crispy Bean. For Clover to have asked him for help indicated that their relationship was quite good. Crispy Bean didn't want to have a dispute with Clover, but he was still very angry with this extremely arrogant guy, so he said, fine. Then I won't say anything, but tell him to stop leeching. If he wants equipment, he has to have the skill to earn it. Crispy Bean's disdain could be heard through his voice. He emphasized the words leeching and skill in a mocking tone. Can you play more seriously? Don't leech anymore, Clover helplessly told Yi Shu. Crispy Bean's words made sense. For a dungeon run by a guild team, the equipment would usually be split among the team members. When a desirable equipment dropped, there would usually be rules to decide who earned it. Yishu's leeching would clearly eliminate him from contention. Okay. The other side had said so many words, but Yishu simply said a single word. He looked like he was about to fall asleep. He sat up, moved his left hand back to the keyboard, and adjusted his mouse. Chen Guo was sitting beside him, so she heard the entire conversation. She thought Yishu was about to show these people his might, but all he said was a dull, okay, just like the previous, earnestly leeching. Chen Guo felt very disappointed once again. Unsatisfied, she spoke her thoughts. What a letdown. Yishu turned his head to look at her. How can you stand such disdain? You actually leeched off of them? Attack. Grief them. Chen Guo just wanted to see these guys lose control over the boss and turn the place into a horror scene. How boring. If you were playing and the team gave you the chance to leech, would you play seriously? Yishu asked. Of course. How else can you prove your strength? Chen Guo said. Prove my strength? Yishu mumbled. He took a worn-out piece of paper out of his pocket and threw it at Chen Guo. What are you doing? Chen Guo thought that Yishu had thrown some trash at her. Strength. Yishu pointed at the worn-out piece of paper. Chen Guo uncrumpled it. It said, Glory Pro Alliance Season 3 MVP, Yi Chu. This worn-out piece of paper was actually a Glory Pro Alliance MVP award certificate. Most people would hang it on a wall and frame it in a conspicuous place, but Yishu had crumpled it up so much that it looked like a piece of trash. You're so annoying. Chen Guo was mad. She threw the paper back at Yishu, who grabbed it and put it back into his pocket. She understood what Yishu meant. This piece of paper was enough to prove Yishu's strength, or perhaps it was to say that he didn't need to prove his strength. He didn't need to go all out to prove his existence. He was perfectly content with others calling him a leech. But now, the others didn't want him to, so Yishu had to at least put some effort in. However, Chen Guo doubted that he would actually play seriously because if he actually played seriously, the team's only choice would be to have him be main tank. Is everybody ready? If everyone is ready, I'm going to pull the boss, Crispy Bean asked the team. After hearing everyone's reply, he charged at the boss. At the same time, a figure flashed beside him. Crispy Bean turned his head and looked. It was that disgusting name again, Unrivaled Super Hottie. What are you doing? Crispy Bean shouted. He thought this guy was actually going to grief them. Chen Guo was getting excited. Was Yishu going to steal the tank position? Ha ha, witness the power of a god. Crispy Bean or whatever, get the hell out of here. It doesn't feel good to have someone with a name like that be a tank. Crispy Bean, do bosses roast you to a crisp? Damage, Yishu casually said. Wait until the tank is pulled before attacking. Don't you understand? Crispy Bean roared. Not just Crispy Bean, but the others were furious too. Everyone knew that for a boss fight, the tank should be given some time to establish aggro before attacking. What? Am I in front of you? Yishu shook his head. Crispy Bean turned his head back. He saw Bone Abyss's boss Guardian Kaiwei raise his humongous axe and charge forward. The aggro was still on Crispy Bean, but this was because Crispy Bean had walked into Guardian Kaiwei's aggro range. If Unrivaled Super Hottie attacked, the aggro would transfer to him. Thinking of this, Crispy Bean immediately attacked. Almost at the same time, Unrivaled Super Hottie also attacked Guardian Kaiwei. Kick him out of the team, Crispy Bean yelled at Clover. Clover clearly suspected Unrivaled Super Hottie's actions too. She had already opened up the team interface, when she heard him say helplessly, "What are you yelling for? Isn't the aggro still on you?" Chapter 552. Controlling aggro through damage. Boss aggro? At this moment in time, Crispy Bean had completely forgotten about it because he had also been aggroed by Unrivaled Super Hottie. He suddenly woke up after hearing his argument. When he took a closer look, he realized Guardian Kaiwei's aggro was still on him. Guardian Kaiwei's huge axe hadn't turned towards Unrivaled Super Hottie despite his attack. The huge axe was still swinging towards Crispy Bean. Bang! He immediately raised the shield in his hands. It was a frequently used movement for tanks. The huge axe collided with Crispy Bean's shield. The attack clearly wasn't anything earth-shaking. Crispy Bean's equipment far surpassed the necessary threshold for this dungeon. He didn't budge a single inch when he blocked the blow. Almost at the same time, he swung his sword and slashed at Guardian Kaiwei. Almost at the same time as him, Crispy Bean also saw unrivaled Super Hottie swing his shield at Guardian Kaiwei's head. Shield attack. This skill could induce a dizzying effect, but all bosses had high resistances to status effects. Bosses couldn't be controlled by players so easily, otherwise they would be too easy to beat. Guardian Kaiwei was a Dragon Guardian and natural had immunity to magic status effects. However, the Guardian did not have complete immunity to physical skills like shield attack. After taking the shield attack, the Guardian's eyes went blurry and he became dizzy. But for bosses, status effects wouldn't last long. Crispy Bean had to face the boss directly as the tank, so he knew the boss's stats, skills, resistances, and patterns very clearly. He also had a good understanding of his own night class, so he immediately calculated that with unrivaled Super Hottie's strength stat, the dizzy effect would only last for 1 second maximum. However, at the same time, a lot of things happened during this 1 second window. Crispy Bean took advantage of this 1 second window. Previously, his mind had wandered away because of his enmity towards unrivaled Super Hottie. After blocking with his shield and striking back, he wasn't sure what to do next. This 1 second window gave Crispy Bean enough time to figure out his next moves. If he didn't have this 1 second, he would have been hit by Guardian Kaiwei's counterattack. This was only the first mini-boss in the dungeon. Crispy Bean had exceptional equipment too, so eating the counterattack wouldn't have been the end of the world, but what if this had been a difficult dungeon? What if it was a boss with extremely hard-hitting attacks? 1 second of rest was especially important. Even though this 1 second was insignificant in this case, it gave him time to recover. 1 second passed by quickly. After recollecting his thoughts, Crispy Bean began pulling aggro like his usual self. Crispy Bean hadn't noticed the importance of the 1 second though. He was even a bit angry at unrivaled Super Hottie for his shield attack because of the same reason as before, he had yet to establish the boss's aggro. Was this guy trying to kill himself by attacking the boss? This guy didn't know how to exercise constraint. Right now, he was actually fighting over the boss with Crispy Bean. The two were attacking Guardian Kaiwei at nearly the same time. The others hadn't moved yet. Teams usually waited for the tank to tell them to attack before attacking. Clove healed him from time to time. The healing wasn't done immediately. After all, healing could also aggro the boss. If she healed him immediately, she might accidentally steal the boss's aggro away from the tank. Unrivaled Super Hottie. Clove already had the team interface out with her mouse hovering over his name. She was just about to kick him out of the team. Then, she heard him say, "Isn't the aggro still on you?" which made her hesitate. If the aggro control hadn't been messed up, then there was no need to kick him out of the team. Clove felt like she should teach the new member of the guild rules. She didn't need to be so strict. During her moment of hesitation, the two had gone back and forth attacking the Guardian Kaiwei several times already. Everyone was watching in shock, including Crispy Bean. Flustered and exasperated, he shouted, "Kick him out of the team," twice. Clove didn't move though. She simply replied, "Good aggro control." Crispy Bean really wanted to shout, he could steal away the boss's aggro at any moment, but he resisted. For a tank, especially the top tank in a guild with exceptional equipment, he felt too ashamed to say such words. Both people were tanks. His equipment was better and the aggro was still on him. Why did he need to worry about a squishy tank stealing away the aggro? Crispy Bean felt a bit regretful. He felt like he had lost too much face. Those "kick him out of the team" shouts were mostly done in anger at unrivaled Super Hottie's actions, but what if the others misunderstood it as being unable to manage the aggro? Wasn't that what Clove's reply meant? He definitely didn't want to be misunderstood. Crispy Bean shouted inwardly. He didn't want to think about whether or not his "kick him out of the team" shouts had shown his fear of losing control of the boss. "Do you want to steal the boss's aggro from me? That won't be possible." Finally, Crispy Bean shouted at unrivaled Super Hottie. "Senior, I'm DP Singh. I'll control the aggro well," unrivaled Super Hottie replied. DP Singh? Control the aggro? These words made everyone's hearts thump. If he could completely control the boss's aggro when he was attacking, directly going up to attack the boss wasn't an issue as long as he had the confidence that he wouldn't mess up. Did this squishy tank actually have that type of control? In Glory, damage, healing, and taking damage could all be calculated. However, aggro couldn't. This completely depended on a player's intuition and experience. As a result, they didn't know how well Unrivaled Super Hottie was controlling his aggro. They only saw him attacking immediately after Crispy Bean. Every time he did it, everyone's hearts would jump. They felt like any one of his attacks could make the boss go out of control. Unrivaled Super Hottie, how about you wait before DPs sing? Clove finally spoke. And for the first time, she shouted out his shameless name. No need, Crispy Bean replied to her. Crispy Bean had entered a full-on competitive mode. As the main tank with exceptional equipment, it would be a disgrace to lose control of the aggro to this guy. Even telling others his worries over the situation would be shameful. Right now, Crispy Bean was determined to show off his ability as a tank. Yeah, there's no need. I'll control it well. I won't snatch the aggro from you, Yishu also replied. You just try and snatch it from me, Crispy Bean said. His hands moved like a blur. If he had been taking it easy in the beginning, he was completely serious now. Snatch it, snatch it, snatch it, Chen Guo urged Yishu. She really wanted to see this type of situation. Little kid, Yishu gave Chen Guo a disdainful look. He ignored her and continued to control his damage output. After a short moment, Yishu asked, why isn't anyone else coming up? How long do you need to establish aggro before it's stable? Crispy Bean heard this and furrowed his brow. He had been too focused and had forgotten about it. If the tank didn't say anything, the others wouldn't dare to attack. He hadn't said anything, which actually resulted in this squishy tank questioning his ability. I forgot, Crispy Bean explained. It was true, but it sounded bad. Clove heard him speak and, not waiting for Crispy Bean to give the order, she immediately ordered, everybody, advance. The field became a beautiful sight to behold. Guardian Kaiwei was only a mini-boss. The Guardian only had powerful single-target attacks. He didn't have any strong AoE skills, so with the aggro being controlled well, everyone could safely attack. How could Crispy Bean be careless? He was afraid the aggro would shift onto Unrivaled Super Hottie. He was taking this originally easy dungeon more seriously than a 100-player team dungeon. Under everyone's attacks, Guardian Kaiwei's health rapidly dropped until it fell. The Guardian dropped an equip. Clove went up to look. It was a Dragon Guardian axe. This weapon could be used by priest classes, clerics, paladins, exorcists, or knights. There were currently 3 priest classes in the team, Crispy Bean, Unrivaled Super Hottie, and Clove. Clerics could also use axes, but because clerics prioritized intelligence, physical attack weapons like axes didn't suit them. Crispy Bean already had equipment that surpassed equipment that could be found in this dungeon, so he didn't need this Dragon Guardian axe. It looked like Yishu's Unrivaled Super Hottie was the only choice. However, as a guild team, there were other options too. For example, the team could choose to donate the equip to the guild storage and then split the guild contribution points later. Another choice was to sell the item for money and then split the money. For a team specifically meant to get equipment for Unrivaled Super Hottie, under normal circumstances, no one would object to Clove giving the Dragon Guardian axe to Unrivaled Super Hottie. However, there was a lot of controversy surrounding this guy. Someone with a leech-like performance was going to be the first to get equipment? Would the others be unhappy with it? Clove was still hesitating. The others were already asking what she got. Clove showed everyone the Dragon Guardian axe to see. The suitable classes for it made many disappointed. In the end, that Unrivaled Super Hottie laughed out loud, ha ha. It's mine. Thanks everyone. Do you feel no shame? Sure enough, Crispy Bean had the same thoughts as Clove, except he spoke his feelings without any hesitation. What? You want it too? If you want it, you can have it. Tanks get priority, Yishu said. Why the F***ck would I want this? Crispy Bean was about to go insane. Chapter 553. Damage Output Competition. Crispy Bean didn't care about any of the equipment that dropped from Bone Dragon Abyss. Just now, this Unrivaled Super Hottie actually thought he wanted to compete for the axe. It made him feel like he was being looked down upon. What? You don't want it? If you don't want it, then who else would want it? Yishu asked. Clover really felt worried. Did this guy really not know the rules, or was he pretending not to know? She didn't want to say it in public, so she privately messaged Unrivaled Super Hottie, I told you you could leech and the first equipment that dropped can be used by you, but how am I supposed to give it to you like this? Oh, don't worry. I'll just use it temporarily. Once I get out of the dungeon, I can give it to you. I'm a tank, so why would I need this weapon, but wouldn't it be better to temporarily use it to raise my DPS? Yi Shu replied. Clover was surprised. She hadn't thought he would reply in such a way. When an equipment was given to someone, the system would notify those in the team, so she had to say a few words before giving it out. Clover told the rest she would give Unrivaled Super Hottie the axe temporarily. After explaining the reason, she handed the Dragon Guardian axe to Unrivaled Super Hottie. Shua. Yi Shu immediately switched his Knight Sword and Shield with the Dragon Guardian axe. This axe was a dual-handed weapon, so he wouldn't be able to equip both the shield and the axe. The Dragon Guardian axe wasn't anything unique. It was just big, and the two blood-red streaks on the two sides of the axe made it quite eye-catching. Right now, it looked very powerful in Unrivaled Super Hottie's hands. The other players looked at him in envy. Crispy Bean glanced at him and then continued to pull monsters. The dungeon battle continued. Unrivaled Super Hottie, with his new Dragon Guardian axe, was no longer leeching. He was on the front lines killing monsters. Clover, as the rear support, paid more attention to Unrivaled Super Hottie and realized that he didn't need any instruction from her. His coordination with the rest of the team was solid. When she checked the total damage charts, she jumped in fright. Even though Unrivaled Super Hottie was still in 9th place, his numbers had increased greatly. Before, he had only been a third of the player in the 8th position, but now, he was already 2/3. And during this time, they had only killed the first boss and cleared 3 waves of monsters. Even though Unrivaled Super Hottie had switched his equipment, it shouldn't have been able to make him increase his damage by so much. Thus, most of the damage must have been from attacking the first boss. The boss's health was equivalent to several waves of monsters. However, at that time, Unrivaled Super Hottie was only wearing his original equipment. He didn't have any advantage over the other players on the team, but for him to be able to catch up so quickly. What skill! His ability to output damage must mean his skill level wasn't ordinary. After Clover noted this point, she paid more attention to Unrivaled Super Hottie. With his Dragon Guardian axe, the current Unrivaled Super Hottie had already caught the eye of the other team members. When Clover looked at the damage charts, she saw that Unrivaled Super Hottie was rapidly rising in the ranking, nearing the player in 8th place. Once he caught up to 8th place, he wouldn't be too different from everyone else. The other 7 players were all around the same skill level. Even though there were differences, the differences weren't large. The player in 1st place was Crispy Bean, the tank. After all, he had the equipment advantage and the tank's attack couldn't be too low. Damage was a huge factor in calculating aggro. Only by relying on aggro-inducing skills wouldn't be able to provide stable control over the monster. This person isn't simple. Clover finally concluded. Not just her, but the other players also noticed this. The players, who liked to check the damage charts, saw his huge rise upwards. Even though he had just gotten the Dragon Guardian axe, it was only a slight advantage. Everyone's equipment had level 70 requirements. There couldn't be a heaven and earth difference between the weapons. Unrivaled Super Hottie's rise couldn't be brought about solely because of the weapon. Everyone else began to raise their damage output. Even though the enemies were NPCs in PvE, players liked competing with other players. The competition in PvE was only slightly different than competition in PvP. PvP was a battle between players, while PvE was a battle of numbers. The players in the team had started a numbers battle over damage output. No one wanted to lag behind. With the start of this competition, their battle strength soared and they advanced through the dungeon even faster. In the blink of an eye, they reached the second boss in Bone Dragon Abyss. It was the same as the first boss. Crispy Bean went forward to pull the boss and Unrivaled Super Hottie went forward with him. Crispy Bean already had no more words to say to him, but Unrivaled Super Hottie had already proved that he didn't have any intention of causing trouble. The first boss battle also proved his ability to control aggro. He wouldn't be an obstruction to the main tank. Crispy Bean remained silent and just hit the boss. However, he also paid attention to Unrivaled Super Hottie's fighting method. He realized Unrivaled Super Hottie was fighting slightly differently than when he fought the first boss. The other 7 DPS players were very worried. When they reached this boss, Unrivaled Super Hottie caught up from his 1/3 damage deficit. Even though he was still in 9th place, he was very close to the others. He had rushed forward to start putting out damage, but the others could only watch helplessly. If this kept going, wouldn't they just be watching his damage surpass their damage? However, the tank hadn't said anything yet, so they didn't dare to move. Unrivaled Super Hottie dared to fight alongside the tank without the tank losing aggro, but they didn't have the ability to do that. They thought it was probably because he played as a tank and knew the Knight class well, so he had a good grasp over managing aggro. Normal players could also manage aggro, but not as precisely as he could. The 7 others could only watch in helplessness. Having not heard Crispy Bean say anything in a long time, they were starting to look down on him. It's been so long and he still hasn't established the aggro? It had only been 5 seconds since Crispy Bean had pulled the boss. However, for the 7 other players, those 5 seconds felt like eternity. Finally, everyone heard Crispy Bean shout, "Everyone, up!" The 7 impatient players immediately pounced on the boss like tigers and went all out. One of the brothers had charged forward too ferociously and crashed into Crispy Bean. Teammates couldn't do damage to each other, but it could still mess up his positioning. The crash had caused Crispy Bean to shift slightly, resulting in his shield failing to block the second boss's attack. "What are you doing?" Crispy Bean roared. This normal player didn't have the courage to shout back at the tank. He hastily whimpered, "Sorry." He moved 2 steps back and then started putting out damage. If he didn't, he would fall behind. Their fierce attacks caused blood to constantly spurt from the boss. With a strong tank, the boss battle wasn't anything difficult. The second boss quickly fell. No one cared about the drops. They immediately pulled up the damage charts. F***CK. With just one boss, Unrivaled Super Hottie shot past the other 7 players. In addition, compared to the slight differences between the 7, the second place Unrivaled Super Hottie was far ahead of them now. He had even shrunken the distance between the player in first, who had a huge advantage in equipment. Too amazing. The others could only admit their defeat. In the beginning, he had just been leeching, but as soon as he stopped leeching, his damage output immediately soared. In addition to his weapon advantage, they couldn't compete anymore. At this moment, Clover picked up the equipment and showed it to everyone. Everyone immediately began murmuring. Angry Dragon Sword. It was a level 70 greatsword, which berserkers or blade masters could use. In the team, there was a berserker and a blade master. However, this blade master used lightsabers, so he didn't have any proficiency in greatswords and backed away in tears. The berserker shouted in happiness and took the angry dragon sword in front of everyone's envious eyes. This berserker placed 4th in the damage charts. His spirit rose after switching equipment. He had more confidence now, but he had completely forgotten that Unrivaled Super Hottie had caught up from a 2/3 damage deficit. He had surpassed them after killing the monsters between the first and second boss. A better weapon clearly wouldn't account for such a rise. But in any case, the other 7 hadn't been too far apart in damage output. With a better weapon, his damage output would clearly be shown. After killing a few waves, the berserker reached 3rd place and looked like he could compete with the 2nd place Unrivaled Super Hottie. The other 7 players felt somewhat disheartened. At this moment, one of the players who found an item shouted in joy, "Team leader, hurry up and come over here." "What is it?" Clover immediately went over. One of the monsters had dropped a golden weapon. When she picked it up, she was surprised. Blue weapon. A mob monster had actually dropped a blue weapon. In terms of probability, small monsters obviously had the chance to drop good equipment, but it was a very low chance. If not, why would bosses be valuable? However, their team had gotten good fortune. A small monster had actually dropped a blue weapon. They were in the Bone Dragon Abyss, so the equipment dropped would be from the dungeon. This dagger was given to the assassin, who found it. Thus, another person began rising up on the damage charts. After several waves, the 2 with better weapons had pulled a distance apart from the others, but at the same time, they also discovered that Unrivaled Super Hottie had widened the distance even farther. That guy was clearly going after the first place Crispy Bean, but that Crispy Bean had equipment that far surpassed theirs. He had several pieces of purple equipment. With such great equipment, wouldn't his damage output naturally be high? Chapter 554. Bone Dragon Alton. Only Crispy Bean wasn't aware of the huge shift on the damage chart. As a tank, Crispy Bean also had to put out damage, but with his exceptional equipment, it was obvious that his damage output would be greater than the rest of the team. Thus, he had only checked before the first boss and saw his gigantic lead. At the same time, he looked down on Unrivaled Super Hottie's leeching, and then stopped paying attention to the chart afterwards. After beating the third miniboss, everyone took a break. Crispy Bean took a look at the damage chart out of boredom and jumped up in surprise. The second to last place Unrivaled Super Hottie was no longer there. Crispy Bean counted from the bottom one at a time, until he saw him in second place. In addition, his damage numbers were about to surpass his own. How is that possible? Crispy Bean wailed. Even if he was a tank, his equipment advantage should put him far above everyone else, but at this moment, he was about to be beat. Crispy Bean had a hard time believing it. What is it? Crispy Bean's cry had caught the attention of the others in the team. No one except Clove said anything. Oh, it's nothing. I was just looking at some gossip, Crispy Bean said. What gossip? Clove asked again. It's nothing. It's nothing. I saw wrong. Crispy Bean hastily excused himself. He simultaneously looked at Unrivaled Super Hottie and began examining his equipment. Could there be some sort of abnormal equipment that I overlooked? Crispy Bean thought. He carefully checked every equipment on Unrivaled Super Hottie, not neglecting even a piece of jewelry. Nothing. He had nothing abnormal on him. Crispy Bean was quite experienced with night equipment. The equipment on Unrivaled Super Hottie exposed his poverty. Even the Dragon Guardian Axe wasn't anything in Crispy Bean's eyes. None of his equipment had any hidden strength. How is that possible? How is that possible? Crispy Bean didn't dare to express his doubts. He could only mutter to himself. His cry hadn't disrupted the team's mood. The third boss had actually dropped another weapon. Players place the most value on weapons. In this dungeon, 3 bosses and a monster had dropped a total of 4 weapons. Their luck this run was extremely good. Everyone was happily discussing their luck. It was too bad the 4th weapon was a ninjutsu though. The team didn't have any ninjas, so no one could use it. In the end, the team decided to donate it to the guild and split the contribution points. Everyone was doing their best to deal damage. Clove felt like the mood was good and felt happy in her heart. Only Crispy Bean was still pondering over how in the world it was possible for Unrivaled Super Hottie's damage to be so high. From then on, Crispy Bean began paying attention to the damage chart and Unrivaled Super Hottie's moves. He adjusted his pulling method and put more effort into dealing damage. His adjustment produced results. Unrivaled Super Hottie's name stayed at second place, unable to pass him. After killing off the last wave of monsters, the team reached the end of Bone Dragon Abyss to face off against the final boss of the dungeon, Bone Dragon Alton. Alton used to be a red dragon, but after dying, it became a bone dragon. Most of his stats had already changed, such as Dragon's Might. Report your spirit, Clove asked everyone before the final boss. As Heavenly Domain players, they knew why she asked about their spirit. Because as long as one was against a dragon, Dragon's Might would take effect. If a player's spirit didn't reach a certain level, the player would be affected by Dragon's Might. According to the game, the player would feel threatened by the dragon and be unable to display his or her full strength. When this happened, the character's stats would weaken depending on the level of Dragon's Might and the character's spirit. Alton was a bone dragon. As an undead creature, it had lost much of its dragon abilities. Even though it still had Dragon's Might, it couldn't compare to other dragons. In front of Alton, players could accumulate enough spirit to negate the effects of its Dragon's Might. The game didn't announce the data to the public, but players had already figured it out. Heavenly Domain players weren't noobs. Before running a dungeon, they would look at a dungeon guide. They had known the boss was a dragon. They reported their spirit stat. All of them had reached a level where they could ignore the effects of Dragon's Might. This was the benefit of standing on the shoulders of giants. At release, Alton had been an extremely difficult boss to beat. The bone dragon made every player's head hurt. It looks like everyone prepared well. Clove notified everyone before the run about this issue. It had only been a reminder though. Actually getting the equipment to meet the requirements wasn't something that could be done just by thinking about it. However, it looked like everyone had prepared well and worn proper equipment that could ignore Alton's Dragon's Might. Speaking of this, Bone Dragon Abyss was already considered outdated, so their equipment didn't need to be amazing. Of course, the team replied. Clove followed, however, negating Alton's Dragon Might isn't everything. Be mindful of his attacks. You all might have read the dungeon guide, but I should still talk about it again. First is his bite attack. It's a single target attack. Before attacking, Alton will lower its head. The attack has a range of 12 units and does lots of damage. The attack also has a chance to inflict a level 70 bleed. Be careful of his bite, especially cloth armor classes. If you get bitten, drink a potion immediately. Understood. The two cloth armor characters replied. There's also his wing attack. Alton will lifts its wings and attack. The starting animation is very obvious, but it's not so easy to predict because of the many ways it can use the attack. There are different ways of dodging and different safe spots every time. It's not easy to describe. Just make sure to be on the lookout for it. In addition, Alton has a tail attack, which can be used in many ways. It can do a horizontal sweep, whip strike, or a stab. The horizontal sweep has a wide range, making it difficult to dodge. However, if you predict it, you can dodge it. As for the tail whip, it's more flexible than the horizontal sweep, so be mindful of it. As for the stab, it has a quick starting animation and is difficult to see. The stab is the most difficult to deal with. Try not to stay too close to each other to minimize the damage taken. Finally, Alton has a breath attack. The breath attack covers a reverse triangle area. The area isn't fixed. The bigger the area, the longer the startup animation will be. However, the power is always the same. Besides the fixed damage, it will also lower your health by 50% and lasts 10 seconds. This effect cannot be dispelled and is very troublesome. If you get hit while at 50% health, it's possible that you will die in one hit, so if you get hit by his breath attack, immediately leave the range of battle and wait until the effect wears off before going back in. Quote. What if the tank gets hit? Someone asked. The tank would certainly be directly facing the boss. It would be difficult for the tank to avoid such a wide area breath attack. If the tank left the battlefield, the boss would follow him. Normally, this boss requires a secondary tank. When the main tank is hit by the breath attack, the secondary tank will take the aggro. However, we don't need one. Crispy Bean can hold on even with half his health, so you don't need to worry, Clove said. Okay, everyone understood and paid their respects to Crispy Bean. Crispy Bean had been waiting for this moment and gave his thanks. Afterwards, Clove explained the strategy. Once the team finished resting, they started the fight. Crispy Bean was naturally the first to charge forward. At the same time, he didn't forget to look around him. Sure enough, Unrivaled Super Hottie had followed him. At this point, everyone knew he wouldn't mess up the aggro, so Crispy Bean couldn't say anything about his actions. However, the final boss wasn't a mini-boss. It had tricky attacks and besides its bite attack, it didn't have any other single target skills. When it attacked the tank, it would definitely attack the others at the same time. Right now, Crispy Bean really hoped this guy would be sent into outer space by Bone Dragon Alton's tail. Crispy Bean used a strong aggro skill to pull the boss. A green glow shone from the two black eyes of Bone Dragon Alton. It lowered its head and chomped at Crispy Bean. Crispy Bean had prepared. He raised his shield and blocked the giant fangs. Just like this, he blocked the attack. Due to the shield, the bleed effect wouldn't take effect. This was one usage of a shield. He took out his sword and attacked the dragon's head. Metal collided with bone, producing a ear-piercing noise. The sound was so bad, Crispy Bean couldn't help but furrow his brow. At this moment, a figure came descending from the sky. With two hands holding a huge axe, he slammed the axe into the dragon's head before it could pull out. The ear-piercing sound was so loud it made Crispy Bean shiver. Unrivaled Super Hottie's brave strike was like an attack towards his spirit. Bone Dragon Alton pulled back its head and flapped its two wings. At nearly the same time, Crispy Bean and Unrivaled Super Hottie rushed forward together below the Bone Dragon. This was a safe space, where the Bone Dragon's wings wouldn't be able to reach. However, with both knights running in, the space was a little bit narrow. Don't get in my way. Whenever Crispy Bean saw this annoying guy and his annoying name, he would feel extremely agitated. Yi Shu didn't reply. After the Bone Dragon flapped its wings, he immediately rushed out of the safe space. Aha! You stupid noob. Go die. Seeing this scene, Crispy Bean was delighted. After the bone wings went out, the bone wings would certainly retract and the retraction would also do damage. Rushing out now was still too early. This was a mistake numerous players made against the boss. Careful, Clove saw the scene and immediately gave a warning. Chapter 555. Night Spirit. A DPSER like Yi Shu, who could attack relentlessly without having the aggro go off the tank, might draw some jealousy from other DPS players, but he was definitely loved by the team leader, tanks, and healing classes. However, in this current team, the one who hated this DPSER the most was a tank. Crispy Bean was dressed in a set of superior equipment. Regardless of whether the aggro went off the tank because of DPS or having another DPS surpass his own damage output, he would find it shameful. However, this DPS was so outstanding that it caused Crispy Bean heart to tremble. He could already feel that unrivaled Super Hottie hadn't made the aggro go off the tank because of his control. It is only because of that control that unrivaled Super Hottie's current output damage was below Crispy Bean's. If this was a DPSER whose role was to deal damage, the two shameful things would have already happened. An excellent DPSER should have decreased the pressure that would be placed on the tank, but instead Crispy Bean felt as if his pressure multiplied. He wished that unrivaled Super Hottie would hurry and die. Now his wish would finally happen. Unrivaled Super Hottie unexpectedly chose this opportunity to rush out and misposition himself. Clove yelled out for him to be careful, but Crispy Bean knew clearly that if he reacted to the warning now, it would definitely be too late. Forwards, backwards, left, or right. No matter which way he went, it would be impossible to be faster than Alton's wing attack. Die die die. Crispy Bean couldn't express his excitement out loud, so he could only speak it continually in his heart. In the blink of an eye, the retracting wing already covered unrivaled Super Hottie. He could hear a faint clashing sound. What a great sound to hear. Originally, Crispy Bean hated the clashing sound between bones and metal, but at this moment, he found the sound very pleasant. Alton's bone wing finally fully retracted. Crispy Bean couldn't wait to take a look at the results. The sight of unrivaled Super Hottie rolling on the ground from the sweep of the bone wing would be humiliating. After Alton retracted its wing, it turned its body and swept its tail towards them. Not bad. Just like this. Crispy Bean was excited. He knew clearly that with a knight's toughness, a wing attack was not enough to instantly kill, but the addition of a tail sweep would be just enough. After all, this was a dungeon for 10 people and unrivaled Super Hottie's equipment was poor even with the Dragon Guardian axe. However, because he used this double-handed weapon, he didn't have a shield. Speaking of defense, there was a significant difference between having a shield and not having a shield. At this moment, Crispy Bean was afraid Clove would heal him. However, Crispy Bean already thought about it before. Right at the moment when unrivaled Super Hottie made a mistake in positioning, Crispy Bean also made a little mistake in positioning. Thus, he also entered the wing attack's range. Crispy Bean pretended not to notice and didn't block with his shield. There was only one cleric on the team. For a situation like this, it was obvious whether one should prioritize the tank or the DPSER. Crispy Bean admired himself for being able to plan so much in a single moment. When he saw his health gradually recover, Crispy Bean revealed a dark smile. As expected, Clove chose to heal him in this instant. At the same time, Alton's tail swept towards unrivaled Super Hottie. In fact, the boss's current aggro was still on Crispy Bean, so its attack was aimed at Crispy Bean. However, unrivaled Super Hottie positioned himself there, so he became the first person to receive the attack. Crispy Bean, of course, would hate to miss this scene. His unblinking eyes stared towards the direction of unrivaled Super Hottie. He even continued to scheme evilly. If this tail didn't manage to sweep unrivaled Super Hottie to death, then... Just as Crispy Bean reached this thought, his brain suddenly halted for a moment. This was because he saw unrivaled Super Hottie rolling around. Without any delay, he lay prone and slipped through the only gap as the dragon swept its tail across. Unrivaled Super Hottie stopped right behind Alton. As he stood up, he swung his Dragon Guardian axe in an arc. After straightening up, he continued to use all sorts of attacking skills. He completed all of the movements in one go. Once everything replayed and connected together, his previous act of continuous rolling became less humiliating. Just from the scene, where he lay prone through the gap under the tail sweep was thrilling enough to be recorded, watched, and replayed for 100 times. How is this possible? Crispy Beans couldn't close his gaping mouth. This had to be a coincidence. Crispy Bean thought. This was because under normal circumstances, it would have been too late to use such a method of dodging. However, at that time, Unrivaled Super Hotties was already rolling because of the wing attack. The speed of his roll was faster than what could be done by players. He was able to complete such a risky dodge by borrowing the speed generated from being hit by the wing attack. Crispy Bean hoped it was just a coincidence, but unfortunately it didn't seem like it. After rolling, Unrivaled Super Hottie continued to attack. He was absolutely calm. Who would believe that he was able to escape from such a desperate situation through luck? It was certain that calmness originated from confidence. He was confident that he could dodge the attack, so that chain of rolling wasn't a coincidence. He deliberately used Alton's wing attack to position himself. A method like this actually existed? Crispy Bean's mental pressure grew. How about the others? They were also struck dumb with astonishment by this scene. Yishu's Unrivaled Super Hottie continued his attacks at once after rolling. The other members froze for a moment in awe. Even Clove, who was meant to quickly heal Unrivaled Super Hottie, was shocked stiff for a second. That was so close, Clove exasperated while healing Unrivaled Super Hottie after she broke out of her shock. Haha, it's good to have a priest, Yishu said as he continued to attack. As Crispy Bean watched Unrivaled Super Hottie slowly recover his health, he gnashed his teeth in anger, but he couldn't come up with any calculations. Don't tell me that I have to finish this dungeon quietly like this? I refuse. Crispy Bean looked around to see if there were any other chances, but Unrivaled Super Hottie positioned himself behind Alton. Between the two, one of them faced the dragon's front and the other faced its back. The bone dragon's body was not small. He couldn't even see Unrivaled Super Hottie in person, so how could he make any further calculations? Crispy Bean continued to fight the boss half-heartedly. On the contrary, other people were passionate like fire. Especially those who had received weapons from Bone Dragon Abyss threw out damage ruthlessly. They wanted to leave the others behind and get closer to their targets ahead. For a moment, the competition in the damage charts was in full swing as the players competed with one another. Only the rankings of Crispy Bean in first place, Unrivaled Super Hottie in the second, and Clove in last place were stable. The other 7 people competed with one another like a race car match. However, 2 groups formed between the 7 people, those with and without dropped weapons. However, Crispy Bean wasn't in the mood to care what happened below him on this list. There was only one name in his eyes, Unrivaled Super Hottie. This fellow's name continued to hang behind him steadily from start to finish. It seemed as if he would surpass Crispy Bean at any time. Crispy Bean didn't have any methods to getting rid of Unrivaled Super Hottie, so he could only grit his teeth and try to crush Unrivaled Super Hottie under his name. However, no matter how he fought, he still wasn't able to pull away from him on the damage charts. Unrivaled Super Hottie was like a cat catching a mouse. The cat wanted to catch the mouse, but would restrain itself and patiently follow behind as if teasing the prey. Crispy Bean's eyes were close to spewing fire. His emotions surged as his performance became more and more chaotic. He would only consider which skill's damage output was greatest and immediately chose to use it. However, would his total damage rapidly shoot up from blindly using skills with high damage? Of course not. In order to have a higher damage output, apart from optimizing skill cooldowns, one had to take note of random effects triggered by the skill or extending buffs given by skills. Just standing there and putting out skills? That would be the legendary brainless DPS. True experts at dealing damage might not have it easier than a tank in terms of technique. The reason Crispy Bean had high DPS was because he had good equipment. But he still continued to grind his teeth and brood about the damage output. He also continued to try making different adjustments. Not only did his damage output become unstable, even his responsibility of keeping the boss's aggro was influenced. He was only focused on competing with Yishu. He failed to realize that the other players at this moment were also competing, and it became more and more intense. The damage output increased and the boss's aggro also whirled up. Moreover, they trusted him as the chief tank, so they had completely forgotten about controlling the boss's aggro. Crispy Bean was still grinding his teeth and playing as both DPS and a tank though. Suddenly, the bone dragon turned its body. Its pair of pitch-dark eye sockets changed to glare at another target instead. The aggro is off the tank. Clove turned pale with fright and yelled out continually. The other 7 DPSers had already roughly grasped the set pattern of attacking the boss. Amidst their risky thrills with no danger, They had become extremely excited about their competition. They never thought that with unrivaled super hottie so high up, that they would be responsible for causing the aggro to go off the tank. At this instant, the person who caused the aggro shift secretly felt satisfied in his heart. This was actually the mindset of many DPS players. To cause the aggro shift was something they were proud of instead of feeling ashamed about. They believed that this was a proof of their mighty DPS. There was nothing wrong with thinking like this. It was true that causing an aggro shift meant having a high damage output, but there was not much else to it. Having high damage output did not necessarily mean that they were an expert in dealing damage. Having a high damage output could perhaps only be because of their equipment. On the other hand, experts in dealing damage could have a high result of damage output, while not letting there be any bothersome problems like causing an aggro shift. The brothers who chuckled to themselves only had time to feel accomplished for a moment before Alton turned around. The dragon's head raised as it tore through to bite towards them. However, at this time, a bright light shone from behind Alton as unrivaled super hottie already rushed ahead at a fast pace. He raised his hand to beckon and used a provoke towards Alton at this crucial moment. No, this was not a normal provoke. This was glorious provocation. At this moment, unrivaled super hottie's body was flooded with white light. He activated the Knight's level 50 awakening skill, Night Spirit. Humility, honor, sacrifice, bravery, mercy, honesty, spiritual, justice.